Good morning, guys. Am I audible to all of you?
Good morning, sir. Yes.
My screen is also visible to all of you, right?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Yes,
guys,
sir. Good morning, sir.
yeah. So, guys, today we are discussing entity framework code first approach. Tomorrow, no class. Next class on Saturday, right? Next class is on Saturday, and that is going to take more time. Tomorrow, I'm going to prepare the documents, right? And Saturday, we are going to finish entity framework code first approach. Code first approach, right? And guys, you just tell me what you want to learn next, right, from Monday. So basically, four important concept first I need to discuss. One is LearnQ, right? Another one is solid principles, right? Next one is your design patterns. Next one is your automappers, right? And another important is file handling. These are the important concepts. Apart from this, okay, one is IOC, inversion of control, right? So for me, these are the important concept remaining. Apart from that, many few small concepts are there, like the new features which are introduced in C# 7, 8, 9, 10, some architecture point of view, some .NET framework architecture, and some other concepts are also remaining. So you just tell me which chapter, and all these things are independent, right? Anyone you can start learning, because the dependent concept we are already covered. So you just tell me from where we need to start and what should be the sequence.
For me, is like
Okay, one by one. Tell me.
Sir, I think we should start LinkQ.
Start with
Link,
LinQ, then
solid principle,
solid principle, then
then other.
the voice is not clearly audible to me.
Yes, sir. Then others in continuation.
Okay, the way I'm mentioning in the same sequence, you mean to say that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay,
Yes, yes.
any other suggestion from anyone else?
I think you should move file handling up a little bit. I think that's kind of important, because it's more, you can relevant.
Okay. Anyone else having any
for
suggestion?
me, like for me,
Yeah.
first is like solid principles, design patterns, IOC, then LinkQ.
Solid principle, design patterns,
IOC, then
IOC,
LinkQ.
and
Next
then
LinkQ.
LinQ, right? Automapper
Yeah.
and file
Yeah.
handling, that sequence is going to be
Last.
same, right? And any other suggestions from anyone?
For me, LinkQ.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after that, design pattern.
Okay.
So solid principle, IOC.
Solid principle, IOC,
Yeah.
right?
Understood.
Anyone else? Okay. So let me do. Yeah. Tell me.
So I think LinkQ should be first,
Okay.
and file handling should be the second.
File handling is the second.
And then the rest should follow the way there.
Okay. So what I'm thinking, LinQ, I'm going to start next, because more number of people are interested for LinQ, because LinQ is mostly interrelated with your entity framework, right? So as we are going to finish the entity framework, so it is better to start LinQ. And before design patterns, you should know solid principle, right? So LinQ is going to fast. The solid principle is going to second, And then before starting, okay, then I will start these two things, design patterns and IOC. But before that, I will cover these two things. So this is my sequence, what I'm thinking. Is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Right. So first I will start LinQ, then automappers, then file handling, because automappers is one of the important concept, right? If you are working with any kind of APIs, right? So mostly .NET developers are working on web APIs, right? Very few projects are there that you might get a chance to work with the UI like MVC, but most of the time you will be working on the API part, right? For API part, it is very important to understand this automappers if you are implementing some three different layer levels of applications. File handling is also important. That is what we are going to discuss. We need to understand how to work with a text file, how to work with a XML file, right? And how this binary stream reader is exactly working. That is what it is also important, right? Suppose sometimes you need to get the data from a Excel file and you need to upload those data into the database, or sometimes you need to paste the data from the database and you need to export the data into an XML file, or some data you stored in the text format, you want to read the text data, or you want to write the data into a text file, right? That is also important. And then before design patterns, it is mandatory you should know the solid principle, even though it is not that important, right? But if so, these three things what I'm covering the last, I mean not the last once you cover solid design and IOC, then few other concepts are still pending. That is what we are going to discuss next. But these things will decide how strong you are in OOPS concept. If you are very good at OOPS concept, then you will understand these three things very easily. But believe me, if you do not understand what are exactly the OOPS concept are, then it's very difficult for you to understand the solid principle, design patterns, and IOC, right? So we will start LinQ. LinQ is a very big concept that will take at least 2 weeks. Automapper 2 to 3 classes, file handling 2 classes, solid principle I will take one weekend class, right? Weekend in the sense either on Sundays, right? One big class we will take Sunday and we will cover this concept. IOC again we will take Sunday and we will cover this, right? So basically what my planning is, these 4 we will continue as a normal way, right? 1, 2, this is going to be 3, this is going to be 4, because these are going to take some time. And this solid principle and IOC I will cover in weekend, right? So in the next Sunday I'm going to cover solid principle, and in the upcoming next to next Sunday I'm going to cover this IOC, right? So because why I'm covering, because this will take at least 3 hours to cover all the 5 principles, right? And again it will take 3 hours to cover. So I'm planning to take these 2 things in on Sunday, so that everybody can join the session and they can understand these 2 concepts. As it is taking more time, so I'm taking these classes on weekdays. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Right. So mostly today and then tomorrow no class. Next class on Saturday, and Saturday I'm going to finish the entity framework code first approach. Okay, fine. So let's start today's session. First, we are going to understand how the entity framework code first approach work with an existing database. It might be something not you might be feeling something different, right, sir? Existing database means we should go with database first approach. Why I'm going to work with the entity framework code first approach with the existing database? See, 2 things are there. Suppose your database is designed, your database is designed. It is either fully designed, right? Either it is fully designed or partially designed. Partially designed. Now you need to control the database from your model classes. Now you want to control. Now you want to control the database. You want to control means what? You need to update the structure of the table. You need to modify the structure of the table, right? You need to create. Modify the view of the table, right? That means, as a .NET developer, you want fully control over the database, right? And in that case, if you are working with a database first approach, right? Then in that case, it is not possible to add a new table into the database. It is not possible to delete the structure of a table. It is not possible to update the structure of a view or update the structure of a table using database first approach. In that case, anything, any database related activity you want to do, you want to modify the schema, modify in the database, update the ADMX file. You want to delete some database table, you have to delete the database and then update the ADMX file so that the deletion, that model is going to be deleted from your application. But that is what I'm not going to do. What I'm going to do, my database is either fully designed or partially designed. But now I want control. I want control over the database through my application. Then in that case, what you need to do, you need to use entity framework code first approach. That for sure. Why? Because if I'm not using entity framework code first approach, then how I can manage the database through my application code? Is that possible? No, it is not possible. But the database is already designed. I do not want to create the model classes. I do not want to create the views again. I do not want to create the I do not want to configure the models in my context classes. I don't want to do this thing again in my application code as the database is already created. So in situations like this, we need to use entity framework code first approach to work with the existing database. Clear, guys? Clear?
Yes, sir.
So when you should go with a entity framework code first approach with existing database, first of all, you need to clear this, right? So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this database, right? First of all, I am going to create student, standard, teacher, student address, course, student course, everything I'm going to create. So in the database, then I will show you how I can use entity framework code first approach to create the model classes for the tables and the views, as well as context class for the models, so that the related or the required configuration should be there, either using data annotation attribute or using Fluent API. But this thing should be automatically created by the entity framework from our database, right? But in this case, guys, you will not find that ADMX file, because if you remember, as of now, we are working with the entity framework code first approach. In entity framework code first approach, is there any ADMX file? No, ADMX file is not there. ADMX file is only available whenever you are working with a database first approach, right? There is no ADMX file. But if you remember, we are having some model classes, some context class, right? These things you will find. So basically what is my requirement is, so the number of tables, the number of views that are available in my database, for each table and for each view, it should create a model class in my application, as well as it should create the context class. If required, it should configure the model classes, right? If there is some one-to-many relationship between two tables, or many-to-many relationship between two tables, or one-to-one relationship between two tables, right? Whatever relationship is there, right? Those things should be configured using in my context class, right? And if you remember this context class, right? All the models should be registered using the division properties, right? These things should be automatically created. The constructor should be created. The connection string should be created. Everything should be automatically created based on the what I can say, based on the database, right? So let's see how we can do this. First of all, we need to create the SQL script on the database, which should contain these things, right? So let me copy the things. Guys, remember remember in this case, what will happen? Now you can include only the tables and views. If your database contains some kind of storage procedures, some kind of functions, those things will not be available as part of entity framework code first approach. That is the point that you need to remember. See here what I'm doing, I'm creating the database, I'm using the database, I'm creating the standard table, standard ID, standard name, description, inserting some dummy data into the standard table, creating the teacher table. And here you can see there is a relationship, one-to-many relationship between the standard and the teacher table. So then I'm inserting some data into the teacher table. I'm inserting some course information, course ID and course name, and the teacher ID here, teacher ID referring to the teacher table. Again, it is one-to-many relationships, and this is how you can implement. So this is here I'm inserting some dummy data into the course table. Because one more thing you need to remember. You cannot implement, right? Okay, let me show you this thing. So you can see this is my student table, and here I'm inserting some data, and again there is one-to-many relationship between the student and the standard table. Again inserting some data into the student table, and this is my student address table. And here you can see student ID, it is my primary key, as well as the student ID is also going to be the foreign key, which is pointing to the student table. So if I make the primary key as the foreign key, then what kind of a relationship it is going to represent? Can anybody tell me? It is going to represent one-to-many or one-to-one or many-to-many?
One-to-one.
Guys?
It's one-to-one.
One-to-one. So basically between student and the student address table, there is one-to-one relationship. If the foreign key is created separately, then like the previous, so here you can see foreign key is standard ID, primary key is student ID. Here you can see course ID is primary ID, teacher ID is the foreign key. So if the foreign key is different than the primary key, then it is going to represent what kind of a relationship? Guys?
One-to-many.
One-to-many. And now you can see this is my student course table. We are having some student table, we are having some course table, right? And if I'm including only two tables, and that table is pointing to the right here, you can say student ID and course ID. So the my primary key table is student ID as well as primary key is course ID. So it's a composite primary key. And again, this student ID is a reference key and this course ID is a reference key. So what kind of a relationship this represents? And between what table? So basically it represents many-to-many relationship between the student and the course table. Clear, guys? Now, one more thing I need to include. So basically, whenever you are working with entity framework code first approach, the entity framework will create the model classes based on not only the tables, but also views, right? If you are having some kind of a views in your database, then also it is going to create a database, it is going to create an entity class, or you can say model class. So for that purpose, I'm creating a view called view student course. And this is going to join two tables. This is going to get the data from the student and the student courses and a course table. So basically it's a view. So I have created a few tables where I'm representing one-to-one, one-to-many and many-to-many relationship. Along with this, I'm also showing, I'm also creating one view, and that's it. So our database script is ready. Let me run the execute the script. So database is created. Now, if you refresh, then you will see that EF demo DB is created. That is fine. See, once the database is ready, then we need to see, then we need to understand, right, how I can use entity framework code first approach to create the required model classes, right? Required context class, required configuration, that configuration either or might be Fluent API configuration or might be data annotation automatically based on my database, right? So I cannot go with I cannot go with what entity framework database first approach, because in entity framework database first approach, we cannot have control over the database from our application, right? I want to control the database from my application. I want to delete, I want to update, I want to modify the schema of the database, right? Then for that purpose, I need to go with what? I need to go with entity framework code first approach. Now let us see how I can use entity framework code first approach to work with this database what we just created, EF demo DB. Let me delete this one so that we should not have any confusion. So my database is EF demo DB, right? So let me create an application, right? You can use any version of Visual Studio. I'm going with Visual Studio 2017, but it's no matter. You can use 2019, 2022 in any version of the Visual Studio, right? So I'm creating one application. Okay, new project. So you can see I'm going with one console application, and I'm providing the name of the application as existing database code first approach. Existing database with the entity framework code first, right? So I'm selecting the .NET Framework 4.8, the latest one, because I'm going to work with Entity Framework 6. So Entity Framework 6 means you need to select the latest version of the .NET Framework. Here you can say I'm targeted, the target framework is 4.8, at least 4.5, and should be a later version. I mean, you can use any version which is greater than 4.5. So I'm going with the latest one and click on the OK button, right? So once I click on the OK button, you will see one application is going to be created, and that application is going to be created with the program class, right? That's fine. Now I need to work with entity framework code first approach. For that, what I need to do? First of all, just right click and select. First of all, you just need to add the entity data model. Entity data model. So right click, add new item. So once you click on the new item, select the data and select the entity data model. So I'm going to provide the entity data model as EF. What is the database name? EF demo DB context. I'm providing the entity data model name as EF demo DB. So why I'm providing this? Because my database name is EF demo DB. So I'm going with that database name, and I'm just attaching the context, right? So once you provide this EF demo DB context, right, it is not mandatory to provide. So it's a user defined name, right? So you can give it any name for your model class. I'm just providing this name EF demo DB context. Then I'm clicking on the add button. Once I click on the add button, already we have discussed what are the different options, right? This is database empty code first, right? If you want to create empty code first, you want to go with this, and if you want to create the if you are working with the model first approach, then you have to go with this one. If you want to work with the database first approach, then you want to go with this one. But now I'm not going to work with the empty database. I'm going to work with the code first approach, but from the database. So you have to select this code first from database option. What it is saying, create a code first model based on an existing database. That means if you are having one existing database, and if you want to work with the entity framework code first approach, then you want to choose this model. What this model will do, you can choose the database connection, settings for the model, database object to include in the model. So you can decide what should be the database, what should be the what are the settings you need to provide for the model classes, what are the database you want to include as part of your what I can say model classes, right? Whatever the database you want to include, right? Everything you will have the flexibility, and whatever you want you can do, right? And in this case, you are having the full control over the database from your application code. So once you select this, then click on the next button, right? So once you click on the next button, if you have already created some connection, then those connection will be shown here, right? But if you are not interested with the existing connection, right, database connection, then you can click on the new connection button, right? Let me click on the new connection button. Once you click on the connection button, then you need to decide the data source. So currently we are working with a SQL Server database, right? So I'm going with the Microsoft SQL Server, click on the OK button, right? So then you need to provide the server name. What should be the server name? Server name means what is the IP address or machine name, right, where exactly the database is exist, right? So in my case, the server name is this one, right? So I just copy the server name and go to here, provide the server name, right? So as I already told you, in my machine, I have not installed the mixed authentication. I have installed the Windows authentication, right? So while login, you can see this SQL Server authentication will not work on my machine. So I am going with the Windows authentication. If you want to work with SQL Server authentication, then you need to provide the username and password using which you can log into your SQL Server database. So I'm going with the Windows authentication, right? And once I select the Windows authentication, and once you provide the SQL Server name, and then you need to select the database, right? If this information what you have provided, the server name, the authentication, right? If everything is fine, then in this drop down, select or enter a database name, you will see the required database. So right now you can see my database is visible to me. Why? Because the information what I have provided here is correct. If information is not correct, then you will not find this one, right? So once you select the required database, then you can check whether the whether the connection information what you have provided here is able to communicate with the database or not. If this connection is successful, that means the information what you provided is correct, right? Now, let me do some changes. I'm providing ES. Now select this one test connection. So as the server is not available, so this time it will not give you the connection success message. Still, you can see it is still trying to communicate, trying to connect to the database, but unable to communicate. So you can see this message: a network related or instance specific error occur. Now, just remove the ES and again click on the text connection. See, test connection is succeeded, right? So once the test connection is successful, then click on the OK button. So once you click on the OK button, it will take you to this connection. Choose your data connection widget. So here you can see whatever the entity data model name I have provided, right? That name is coming here as the connection string name. So if you want, you can go with this default name. If you don't want this default name, you want to provide a different name for your connection string, that is also possible. You can go with that name as well, right? So I'm going with the default name. So I'm keeping the entity data model and the connection string name same, right? So once you provide the connection string, and here you can see save connection settings in appconfig file. So that's what it basically, you need to check this checkbox so that it will include the connection information, right? Connection string in the appconfig file. Next, click on the next button. Here, if entity framework, the latest version of entity framework is installed, then it will directly take you to this screen. If latest version is not installed, right, then it will give you the option to select the entity framework version, right? So in that case, you will see this window. Right, so this window, if entity framework, the latest version of entity framework is not installed on your machine, then this window will open and asking you to choose the entity framework version. But if you already installed this one, then this screen will not be come, and directly it will take you to this screen, right? So here you can see it is for taking me to the entity data model widget, and here you need to provide the settings and the and you need to select what are the database object you want to include as part of your entity model, right? So I want to include all the model classes, right? All the databases. So I select this one. So you can see course standard, student address, student course, teacher, everything, right? Then you can see it is also include, again, I'm also going to include these views, right? And you can see these two options are not available because this is not required. Right, and pluralized SQL generated object name means if teacher is there, then the it is going to be teachers, right? So it is selected by default, right? So once you select the database objects, right, then you need to click on the finish button. That's it. We are done. So now you will see that. Now you will see that everything is created automatically for us. For each database table and views, one model class is going to be created, right? Now, if you see, course is there, program is there, standard is there, student is there, student address is there, teacher is there, view is also there. But what is not there? What is not there means the joining table is not there. The student course table is not there. Why? Because this is not there because whenever we insert data into student and course table, automatically the information is going to be stored in the student course table. For that purpose, if you remember in entity, in many-to-many relationship, we have created the course entity, we have created the student entity. Do we have created the course student entity in our model, in our application? No. But whenever we run the application, then at that time you can see that course and database table is there, student database table is there, course students database table is also there. And whenever we enter the data or information into the course and the student table, automatically the data is also inserted into the student courses table. So for student courses, no need for any kind of model in our application, and this is the reason why it is not included. So you can see, this is my standard entity, this is my student entity, right? See, you can see some kind of what I can say, some kind of data annotation attribute is applied, right? And some kind of a teacher entity is there. So now you have the complete control. You want to update this first name column value length to 200, you can update. You want to add a few columns into this class, yes, you can do this. You want to remove few columns into this class, yes, that is also possible. You want to remove one model from your database, yes, that is also possible. You just need to delete that model from the application, or what you need to do, you just need to remove that context of division property from the context class, right? So you can see all the model classes are created based on our database structure, right? And not only you can see this Fluent API configuration is there, right? But also if you go to the model class, if you go to the context class, right? So not you can see this is the constructor. Automatically it is created, right? You can see these are the division properties. So automatically entity framework added the properties. You can see some configuration. So each Unicode false. False means what? Now it is not going to accept Unicode values, right? Why it is not accepting the Unicode value in course entity? So you go to the course entity. So if you go to the course entity, then you will see that what is the data type? Varchar. So if you make this data type as in Varchar, then what will happen? These things will be removed or it will be created with the value, right? So by default, as we created the database table with Varchar data type, so Varchar means what? It is not going to accept Unicode values. As it is not accepting the Unicode values, you can see it is creating the model using the each Unicode false. Clear, guys? And you can see this many-to-many relationship, it is implemented, right? We have already discussed has many with many map student course. What is the left key? What is the right key? That is fine. So student standard entity, right? Unicode is not available, right? So you can see these are the things that you need to understand, right? So any database where we have used the data type as in Varchar. No. So we have not created the database with using the data type in Varchar. You can try that and you will see that this Unicode either might be removed or it will be created with the value true if you use the data type as in Varchar, right? So these are the configurations which is automatically created. So the point that you need to remember, now you have the full control over the database from your application. Whatever you want, you can do now. So once you have created the once you have created everything from the database, right? So now again, if you go to the data, if you go to the app config file, then you will see that connection string. So this is my connection string name, right? What is the data source? Every information is provided. what is the provider I have used, SQL client. So all these informations are also included in your application. Now let me do some changes within the main method, right? So what I'm going to do, right? What is my context class name? My context class name is EFDemoDB context. So let me, right? So you can see this is my context class. Now I can fetch the data from the students table and anything, any database operation you want to perform. Now you can perform, right? So there is no issue, right? So what I'm doing, I'm just fetching the student data and I'm just printing the value on the console, right? Now run the application and you should see the student information on the console window, right? So how many students we have inserted? We have inserted 4 students, and that information you will see on the console window. See, these are the information. Clear, guys?
Yes, thank you.
So how to work with existing database using entity framework code first approach. Any question from anyone?
Yes, I have one question. So when we have database in place, suppose like if we take any database backup and restore it and then regenerate this code. So my question is like here in this case, can the modification will be done from can be done from both the sides, no? Both from
No.
database as well.
See. So just tell me, if you are doing the modification in the database, how entity framework will able to know those things? So entity framework code first approach means what? We are creating, we are updating, we are managing the database through our, right? For example, okay, this is my student entity, right? So what I'm trying to do, this is my table. Student address, right? This is my student address table. So what I'm doing, I'm deleting student course. Even I forgot the syntax. Okay, so this is my student table. So what I'm trying to do, I'm altering the student table. I'm adding the email. So here I'm using nvarchar, right? I'm using nvarchar, right? Now what I'm trying to do, I'm executing this one, right? So now I'm executing this one, right? So now run the application again. See, now run the application. Now go to the student entity. This the student, and does the student entity have that email ID? Yes or no?
No.
No. So now what I'm trying to do, I'm adding one property here, right? So standard ID. So what I'm trying to do, I'm creating one property here. Public string email ID, right? So public string email ID. So I'm running the application. But if you run the application, you will get some kind of a error, right? What kind of error you will get? The database is currently in use, right? So if you want to overcome the database error, so what you need to do? Can anybody tell me? You need to use some kind of a initializer, database initializer. What are the different database initializer we are having?
So this created this.
Right, so different types of database initializer are okay. Create a database if not exist, database is already exist. Drop database if model changes, right? So drop database if model changes. So I'm setting this database initializer here, right? So the model changes, I'm setting this one, right? So what I'm trying to do, I'm just closing this one, right? Closing this one because I will get otherwise that exception. The database already in use, opening the database again. See, currently email is there, but what I'm adding from our application is email ID, right? Go to definition. And here I'm adding the email ID column, but currently email ID is not there. Now run the application. Right, so currently I'm getting this exception, code first migration is not enabled, right? So what I can do is stop creator. Okay, run the application. You can see the column which we have added, that is available here or not, but the column which is not available, right? The property which is not available in the student entity, is that available email property is there or that was deleted?
It's got deleted.
Right, why delete? Because now we are controlling the database from our application. Right now, if you want to modify the database, then you can only modify through your application code. If you do any kind of changes in the database directly, right, and whenever you run the application, then it might be possible that changes you may lost. Right, if you want to manage, see why we're, if you want to manage the database, right, if you want to add object in the database and you want that to be effect in your application code, then why you should go with the entity code first approach? You should go with the database first approach. Why I'm going when we need to go with the database, when we need to go with the code first approach means we want to manage, we want to control the database from our application code. Clear?
Okay, so like, is there any way like both the things are possible in single application, like code first approach, the combination of code first and data first approach?
See,
Is it exist?
that is possible. That is possible. See, currently my application having this one, right? So now what I'm trying to do, I'm going to use the database first approach here, right? So now you can go with a new item, right? Data entity data model. I'm going with the model one, going with the design database first approach, right? So creating a new connection string, right? Or you can see, so that both options are available. There is no issue, right? So I'm providing the database name. I'm selecting the database, right? Now I'm testing the connection successful. Click on the OK button. EF demo DB entities. Next, click next button, right? You can select the database storage procedure, right? Whatever the database you have selected, there is no view, right? So everything, whatever you select, and click on the finish button, right? So you can see both are going to be work as expected. The thing is that what you are using in the program class, you are using the context object, which is created by entity framework code first approach, or you are using the context object, which is created by the database first approach. Now you are having two different context objects, right? One is you can see, okay, now solution explorer. Now you can see this is my context object, right? EF demo DB context, right? So this is the EF demo DB context, and if you go to this one, this is another context object, right? So now you can see this is the student entity, right? And this is the teacher entity, right? But the thing is that the model, so it's only a model class, right? Student is a model class, right? And teacher, it is a model class. Now this model class, right, if you go to this, so it is included in the EF demo DB entities, and also it is included in the DB set properties, right? Both you can use, but ideally we are not. If either you need to go with the database first approach, or either you need to go with the code first approach, but both should not be the case. Clear?
Okay, so we are not
Right,
using these
Now
combinations in
see
real time.
here I'm using EF demo DB context. You can also use the this context class entities, right? So currently you can use this context class, or you can use this context class, right? So if you are using this context class, then entity framework database first approach is going to be used. And if you are using this context class, then database code first approach is going to be used, right? If you are using this one, then if you do any modification in the model class, you just need to update this model class ADMX file. Once you update, then it will update the models, right? Even though if you changes the database, and if you do not update the entity data model, right, then the changes will not be reflected in your application. But if you do modification to this model classes, right, and once and if you are using this context class, right, then automatically those changes are going to be reflected in the database. Clear?
Yes, clear. And like in real time applications, like suppose if we need both the scenarios, then what should be the case?
This is the case.
Like
I'm using both the scenario right now.
But when we can't use
Ideally,
both the
see,
things.
but ideally for a single database, you should not have both the scenarios, right? So it might be possible that you are developing one real-time application, right? Real-time application. Do you think that the one application can only interact with one database? Do you think that one application is, it might be possible that one database, right, from SQL server, right? It might be possible that another database, right, database from MySQL, right? It might be possible that another database is from Oracle. So in that scenario, if your database is already created, then you can go with the database first approach, right? If you want to you want to create and manage one database in a different server, right, in different database server, then you can go with another entity framework code first approach, where it will create the database in MySQL, and then whatever you want, you can do it, right? So basically, but there should not be the case, right? But it should not be the case. I'm interacting with one database, but using both code first and a DB first, right? But this should not be the case. If you want database, you can go with either of the approaches. But if you are having two databases, right, and you can go one database with the entity framework code first approach and another database with the database first approach. If the database is already created, and if you want to you want the DBA to do anything, DBA to manage everything from the database, then in that case you can go with the database first approach. And if you want to manage, right, and if you want to manage everything from the application point of view, then you can go with the code first approach. Clear?
Okay.
Okay. So the next, any question from anyone else? Okay, fine. Now it is very interesting, right? Now we are going to discuss something interesting, right? So stored procedure in entity framework code first approach. So before I have told you that entity framework code first approach, right? If you are creating one database from an existing data, if you are using entity framework code first approach with existing database, then even though if you created some storage procedure in the database, those storage procedure you cannot use here, right? Those storage procedure you cannot use here. But still you can tell the entity framework to use some kind of storage procedure, and there is some advantages of using storage procedure. Can anybody tell me what is the advantages of using storage procedure? What is the
To
advantages of
improve the
using?
performance, it is a pre-compiled one.
Right. So to improve the performance, right, to provide how it is going to improve the performance, because it is a pre-compiled, right? The query plan is already executed. You just need to call the procedure and that's it. But if you are using TSQL statement, every time you execute the TSQL statement, it is going to check the syntax. It is, I mean what? It is going to compile the syntax. It is going to generate the query plan, and then it is going to execute the thing. So the part two steps are going to be removed if you are using storage procedure. And second thing is that if you are having a very big SQL statement, then that SQL statement you need to send over the network, because see, your .NET application is hosted in one server and database is hosted in one server. And from your .NET application, you prepare the SQL statement, then over the network, you need to send that statement to the database, right? And if the SQL statement is a very big statement, then it is going to take more space. And if you are using storage procedure, what you need to do, you just need to call the storage procedure statement, right? And that's it. So that is also another advantages, right? And say third advantages is security. See, if you are sending the TSQL statement over the internet, right? Then then if some hacker, some middleman will hack, some middleman might be possible that the middleman or the hacker hack your data, right? Hack your TSQL statement, then he might be able to know what is the database name, what is the column name, right? Everything he will able to know. But if you put all these things inside a storage procedure and you just send the storage procedure over the network, even though the hacker hacked the storage procedure, then he will not able to identify what code you have written as part of the storage procedure, because he will able to know the storage procedure name and nothing else. So these are the advantages of using storage procedure. Then now let us see how you can perform the CUD operation, right? For retrieving, there is no storage procedure, but for create, or you can say insert, update, and delete operation, you can tell the entity framework to use storage procedure instead of TSQL statement, right? How you can do this? Let us see the step-by-step process. Okay, so what is my intention? My intention is I want to perform the insert, update, and delete operation on the student entity, but not using the TSQL statement, but using the storage procedures, right? How? Let's see the step-by-step process. Okay, let me update the student entity. right? Let me update the student entity. So I have added a simple student entity with few properties, right? So, okay, before that, what I need to do is, right? So entity framework code first approach. I'm not doing anything here. I'm simply adding the student entity, right? And then I'm going to modify the data. I'm going to modify the program class. So can anybody tell me what is the use of this statement? Context.database.log. So basically this statement will write or will log whatever SQL statement is generated by a entity framework, and those statements which are going to be executed on the database, those statements are going to be logged into the console window. So basically what I'm doing here, I'm adding one student. So you can say add, and I'm calling the set changes method. I'm updating the student, right? You can see student updated. So I fetch the student, I update the first name, and then I call the set changes method. And then I'm deleting that student, right? So you can see I'm using the remove method. And I'm calling the set changes method. So in this case, basically, I'm going to perform one insert operation, and I'm going to perform some find, in the sense you can see this is going to do some kind of select operation. Then when I update the entity and call the set changes method, it is going to perform some kind of update operation, and then it is going to perform the delete operation, and whatever the operation, including the insert table statement, because if you are using this context class, then also it is going to create the database table, right? Everything I'm logging into the console window. Right now, let me run the application. Right, so every information you will see here. Okay, let me say, see, this is the create table statement, right? And always it create a migration history table. What is migration history? We will discuss shortly, right? Then it is inserting some data into the migration history table. I'm not talking anything about migration history now, right? So once it create the student table, then you can see it is using a insert statement to insert data into the student table, right? Then it is updating the data, right? Updating the data into the student table using the update statement, and then it is using the delete statement to delete the data, and this is the default. Now what is my requirement? My requirement is I do not want to perform the insert, update, and delete operation, because this is risky. Rather than what I'm going to do, I want the entity framework to create some kind of storage procedure for the insert, update, and delete statement. And then those storage procedures should be used by the entity framework when I'm going to perform the insert, update, and delete operation on the student entity. That is what my requirement, how I can do this. For that, what I need to use one Fluent API method called the map to storage procedure. And how it is going to work? So it's very simple. You just need to call this method on the entity, right? So if you okay, go to this place, right? On which entity you want to you want the entity framework to generate storage procedure and use storage procedure. I want on the student entity. So pass the student entity and simply call the map to storage procedure, right? If you go to the definition of the storage procedure, then you will see configure this type. So configure the student type to use storage procedure for insert, update, and delete operation. The default convention for procedure and parameter name will be used. So what is the default convention means? So by default, it is going to generate some storage procedure in the database, right? And the storage procedure default name is student underscore insert, student underscore update, and student underscore delete. So this is the default name, and whatever the parameter means, whatever the parameter you defined in your application, that is the student ID, first name, and last name, those are going to be used, right? So with this change, right now you can see I have included this map to storage procedure. Now, if you go to the database and if you verify the data, if you go and verify the database, then you will see that currently there are no storage procedure. Currently, there are no storage procedure. But once you include this Fluent API method map to storage procedure on the student entity, then for the student entity, it is going to generate 3 default storage procedure, that is student underscore insert, student underscore update, student underscore delete. And whenever you are using this insert, update, and delete operations, then instead of creating and executing the insert, update, and delete statement, it is going to use the insert, update, and delete storage procedure which it creates for the student entity, right? So in the main method, no need to do any kind of changes. The only changes in the on model creating method, right? So you just need to call this map to storage procedure method, right? So now run the application. So now run the application, student added, right? So student added. So first of all, let me verify the database, whether the storage procedures are created or not. Programmability. So student delete, student insert, student update. These 3 storage procedure created or not? Yes, 3 storage procedure created. Now let us see whether these storage procedure are I mean how it is generated. See, in this case, you can see create a table students. So not only the students table SQL script is there, but also as you have written this map to storage procedure, see immediately what he is doing. He is creating the student insert storage procedure, and the default naming. Default name means the default name is student underscore insert. And whenever you are using the student insert storage procedure, you need to pass 2 parameter. What is the parameter name? The default name. What is default name? Whatever name you have defined in the entity, that name is going to be used as the parameter name. And here you can see first name and the last name, and this is the script, right? And you can see this is the student update procedure. And in the case of update storage procedure, you need to provide the first name, last name along with the student ID. Based on the ID, it is going to update the storage procedure. You can say update student, first name, last name equals to student ID. And in the case of a delete storage procedure, you can see only student ID is required. So here you can see student ID is required, delete, and these things. And then this migration history is there, or that we will discuss next in our next class. And here you can see for the insert operation, it is creating the insert SQL statement, or it is using the student underscore insert storage procedure. It is now using the storage procedure. And while it is using the storage procedure, if you remember the student insert storage procedure expecting 2 parameters. What are the parameter? It is expecting first name and a last name. So you can see here it is passing the first name and last name property value as on so which one? This is pranay and route. Then for the update student procedure, it is expecting 3 parameter: student ID, first name, and a last name. And for a delete storage procedure, it is expecting only the student ID parameter. Clear, guys?
Yes, sir, clear.
Right? So this is how it is using storage procedure, and this is how you can improve the application performance, right? So, but the thing is that if you create the storage procedure in the database automatically, right, whenever you run the application, those are going to be deleted, and the new storage procedure are going to be generated by your entity framework, right? So if you are using entity framework code first approach, then don't do anything manually on the database. Anything you want to do, you need to do using your context class and using your model classes. Clear, guys? Or any question from anyone? Okay. So now you might.
I'm having a question.
Yeah.
Let's say I want to do some logics inside the stored procedure. Then how I can able to do those things?
This is not possible. This is not possible.
Okay.
See, in the student entity, you see in the student entity, you are going to perform either insert, update, and delete operation. Manual logic, you want to perform some manual logic, then you have to write some kind of see what kind of logic you want to execute. Just tell me. Is that a logic can you implement using C# code?
We can able to do the in C# code, but in procedure also they were doing some logic.
But see, this is the advantages of C# code. Na? Why I'm going to perform the logic on the database side? I can perform the logic on my application. See, this is the reason why I'm using entity framework code first approach. Entity framework code first approach basically used, if you remember from day one, I'm telling, if your main intention is to store the data only. If you do not want to perform such the very difficult operation on the very complicated logic on the database side, then only you need to go with entity framework code first up. Right? If you want to perform such kind of a complicated logic as part of a storage procedure, then you need to go with entity framework database first approach. As part of the storage procedure, you can implement logic, right? And while creating the ADMX file, you just include that storage procedure and call that storage procedure, right? So I'm saying you that here you do not have that flexibility to create the storage procedure manually, right? Automatically see in this case, everything is going to be automatically created by the entity framework. Manually, that is not possible. Yes, what is possible manually, you can change the parameter name, you can change the procedure name. By default, for the insert operation, it is using student underscore insert. For the update operation, it is using student underscore update. For the delete operation, it is using student underscore delete. I don't want that default naming convention. I want to provide my own name for the insert, update, and delete operation. I don't want to use the default parameter naming convention, which is followed by entity framework while generating the storage procedure. Can I provide my own naming convention for the parameter? Yes, that is possible. And how it is possible? That is what we are going to discuss next, right? So basically, you cannot use these things, right? If you want to provide these things manually, then you need to specify this thing manually. See, first of all, this is very clear, right? So entity.storage procedure, map to storage procedure, and in the map to storage procedure, right? So you need to provide the information, right? So you need to provide the information, right? What are the information? So previously mapped to storage procedure means automatically 3 storage procedures are going to be created. Now, I'm not interested with the default storage procedure naming convention. I want to create my own storage procedure. I want to provide custom name to the storage procedure, custom parameter names to the storage procedure parameter. That is what I'm going to do. So then in that case, what you need to use this map storage procedure. Then you need to specify the insert, update, and the delete method. And to this insert method, you need to provide the storage procedure name using the hash name method. And once you provide the storage procedure name, then you need to provide the parameter, right? So for the first name property, right? So you can give any name, right? So parameter name is going to be f name. And that f name parameter is mapped with the first name property of your student entity. Here I'm not going to provide the last name. I'm going to provide the L name. Sorry, this is going to be first name. And here I'm going to provide the parameter name as L name. See, in the insert storage procedure, f name is considered as the first name, and the last name I'm providing the same name. And in the update storage procedure, you can see first name parameter is mapped to first name, but the last name parameter value, right, is supplied to the L name parameter of the storage procedure. So this last name, it is nothing but your entity property. So student is one entity or student is one class. Inside that class, last name is available. That last name property value will be stored inside this last name parameter of the storage procedure. So now if you execute the script, right, once you execute the application, it will create one storage procedure with the name sp_student, and inside that storage procedure you will see 2 parameters, one parameter with the name f name, another parameter with the name last name. And this f name parameter value will be coming from the student entity first name property, and this last name parameter value will be coming from the student entity last name property. Similarly, this is sp update. See how I'm So how it is going to fire? Now this sp underscore insert student storage procedure is going to be fire on the student entity whenever you perform the insert operation. Similarly, this storage procedure is going to fire whenever you perform the update operation, whenever you perform the update operation on the student entity. Similarly, sp underscore delete student storage procedure is going to be fired on the student entity whenever you perform the delete operation, right? And here you can see I'm not going to provide a student ID, I'm going to provide the ID. So I have just modified the name of my storage procedure, right? So with these changes right now, you do not need to do any changes in the main method, right? You just need to do the changes here. Once you do the changes, run the application. Right? So if you now let us verify this. So this is my create stable statement, that is fine. Now you can see it is creating some one storage procedure sp insert student. What are the parameter f name and last name? So if you come to this is the storage procedure name, and the parameter name is f name and last name, right? And then this is the script. Then for the update storage procedure, student ID first name and L name. For the update storage procedure, by default student ID, it is going to be taken care, and then it is going to use the first name and L name parameter, right? And for the delete storage procedure, it is taking one parameter called ID. So this is the storage procedure generated by the entity framework. And then if you see, so whatever the value you specify in the first name property, that is Pranay, that is mapped to f name parameter, and Raut is mapped to last name parameter. So this is how you can customize the storage procedure using entity framework code first approach. And if you want to verify these things, then also you can verify in the programmability folder, right? If you go to the programmability folder, you will see sp underscore delete student, sp underscore insert student, sp underscore update student. Clear, guys?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay. So now one more thing, right? So basically I would not prefer to modify these things because it might be confused you. As a developer, I generally prefer the default naming convention, right? Because that is fine, because why I'm going to provide a different parameter name rather than my property name, right? It doesn't make any sense. See, f name, suppose I in the case of f name, I provide some country. It will not give you any error, but it will only make us confused, right? So in the storage procedure, the parameter is going to be country, but in that parameter, I'm going to store the first name value. Does it make any sense? Even though you will not get any compilation error, you will not get any runtime error, the functionality is going to be work as expected, but it doesn't make any sense. Because if you verify the database, some other developer come tomorrow and he check the storage procedure, then he will only able to get confused. What is this country? Country means it's something like India, Australia, United States, America, right? Like this. But why it is mapped with the first name parameter? It is making me confused only. So I always prefer to go with the default naming convention, right? So now one more thing, right? Suppose we are having the standard entity, right? So we are having the standard entity. So now I want to use the standard entity. Again, for standard entity, I need to create the storage procedures. So then what you need to do? You can do this like this. Standard, right? Standard entity, right? Now run the application. Standard students, right? So you can see standard insert. Then you can see standard student insert. Then you can see student update, right? So basically what happened? Now, again, if you want to create a storage procedure, then you can use like this. But if I'm having 10 entities, do I need to write the same statement again and again for 10 times? Right? Do I need to do this? If you want to create storage procedure for all entities, right? If you really want to improve the application of your project, then I generally recommended to follow these things. Always try to create the storage procedure for all of your entities, right? If you want to create storage procedure for all the entities, right, then do we need to write this statement again and again? For suppose today you are having 10 entities, you write this statement 10 times, or a few more entities are added, few more model classes are added, and you forgot to use this thing. Then what will happen? Then the newly added entities, the storage procedure will not be created. So for that purpose, what you need to do, you need to use this syntax. Right? So what it will do, the model builder, the types, these types will return all the types, all the entity types, right? All the entities which are created, which are stored here as part of a division properties, right? So go to types. So what it is saying, now begin configuration of a lightweight convention that applies to all entities and the complex type in the model, right? So this type will return you all the entities. In this case, this student entity, this standard entity, right? Student and standard, all entities, right? For all entities, if you want to provide some kind of a configuration, then you need to provide this types list. Now, for all entities, I want to provide some kind of a configuration. What kind of a configuration I want to provide? I want to map storage procedure to all entities. And you know what a method you need to use, map to storage procedure. So with this single statement now, okay, let me add another student address. Right. So for everything, it is going to create storage procedure. Now run the application. Okay, student address. Right. Now, if you go to the database, just refresh this folder. See, standard, three storage procedure for standard, three storage procedure for student, and three storage procedure for student. Clear, guys? Any question from anyone? And one more point, we can only use Fluent API configuration to map storage procedure, right? There is no such data annotation attribute that you can use to map entity to storage procedure. This is only available with Fluent API. Any question from anyone?
Sir,
Yes.
here any kind of customization possible in the any of the code first or database first,
So
such that
what kind of customization you need?
yeah, such that I create some entity in the database table, and here I straightforward modify to my code. Here we add such that email and the phone number. So it is straight.
See, first of all, if you created the database and if you use entity framework code first approach, then forget about the database. You have to only focus on the context class, right? Whatever modification configuration you are doing in the context class, that will automatically updated in the database. Right? If you do some kind of changes in the database, that will be lost.
Okay, so my question is here only. Is there any kind of customization so we can use that thing freely?
So exactly, that is what I want to know. What kind of a customization you need?
Sir, such that if I want add three entities in my tables.
few entities.
Any of
I mean, you want to add few property like last name.
yeah,
You
yeah,
want to add
yeah,
some email ID here, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so you can do this now. Any problem, there is no issue. You can use this, and whenever you run the application, this student entity will be updated with the latest one, right? Previously in the database, you created the student database table with the 3 properties, right? With the 3 columns. Now you modify the student entity, you add another property into the student, and whenever you run the application, that newly added column, newly added property will be added as a column in the database.
Okay,
Right? So
okay,
if you are
got it, sir.
using code first approach, means you only need to focus on your code, not on the database. Don't do anything manually in the database, because if you whenever you run the application, right, those manual changes will be lost.
Sir, even if code has some business logic also.
Business logic means where you want to put the business logic.
In my C# code.
Business logic, why it is going to lost? I'm not putting a say. My business logic is this one. This is not
Okay.
this is not going to be lost. So code first approach, basically what you are just creating and managing the database. That is only the use of code first. So business logic, wherever you write, that will be as it is there. See, in this case, nothing is going to be deleted from your application, right? What is deleted?
And sir,
The delete
yeah,
if you modify the schema of your, if you modify the models, right, then those changes will be reflected in the database. Nothing is going to be deleted from your C# application.
okay. And sir, you told about the data annotation will be removed if we modify any one of them. So
Sir,
what can
the data annotation modify means, see, data annotation, see, the example that what we have discussed, right? In that example, we are having both the options. One is data annotation, another is Fluent API. You can use both the options, right? If you remember, I have told you,
okay.
if you are using data annotation and Fluent API, entity framework will give priority to Fluent API. Right? See, using data annotation, you can give the entity as a one different name, right? You can give a different table name for one entity. Even though using Fluent API, you can also provide a different name to your entity. Since if you are providing a different table name for the entity using data annotation and using Fluent API, then in that case, whatever name you provided using Fluent API, that will come into effect.
Okay, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And any question from anyone else? Okay. So the last thing what today we are going to discuss is very, it's a small thing, but this is internally managed by entity framework, but as a developer, we should know, right? So, so basically it is kind of a cascading. Cascading means what? Now, whenever we are maintaining some kind of a relationship between 2 tables, right? That means say primary key or foreign key relationship, then in that case, the primary key table contains some master data or some parent data. And while you are entering the child record, along with the child data, you are also entering the master data in the child table. Think the scenario where the master data is deleted. If the master data is deleted, then what will happen to the child data? Is the child data is going to be stay as it is? Is the child data is going to be deleted, or is the child data is going to be set with null value? What will happen? So that is what we are going to discuss next, right? So as we are having different types of relationships, right? How many types of a relationship? One-to-one relationship. We are having one-to-many relationships. We are having many-to-many relationships. Then in the case of one-to-one relationship, there is one parent and one child, right? In the case of one-to-many, one parent and multiple child. In the case of many-to-many, many parent, many child. Then in such kind of a scenario, what will happen to the child records when we delete the parent record? That is what we are going to discuss, Clear what we are going to discuss now, guys? Why you guys are silent? I don't know. Who is admin?
That is
Sir, you are admin, sir?
No,
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 no.
there is one person whose name is showing
No.
admin.
That is Mahesh name. So unfortunately, it is
So,
happening.
what is your name exactly?
Mahesh.
Mahesh, yeah, Mahesh. So because I'm getting confused only. So
Yes, yes. Always I will rename that name, but I forgot today.
no, exactly. Whatever name, your original name that you should give, because it's very
Yes, yes.
difficult me to recognize the names, right?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So basically that is what we are going to discuss. Once we understand the examples, then you will understand this thing very clear, right? So first of all, we need to understand cascade delete in one-to-one relations. So cascade delete means what and how it is going to work. That is what we are going to discuss. For this, what we need? For this, we want to implement some kind of a relationship. Some kind of relationship in the sense we need to implement one-to-one or one-to-zero relationship between two entities. And for this purpose, we are taking the student and student address classes, right? So let me go to the student class, modify the student class. You can see this is my student class, and then we need to modify the student address class, right? So student address class, this is my student address class. So now you can see this class having the student address class having the student reference property, and student class having the student address reference property. And this student address id, this is my primary key, as well as this is also my foreign key. And whenever the primary key becomes the foreign key, then what kind of a relationship is this, guys?
One, two.
One-to-one. So here I'm representing one-to-one relationship between the student and a student and a student address entities, right? So let me remove all these things. Let me remove this one also. Now I'm putting student and a student address. Right. So we have configured 1-to-0, or you can say 1-to-1 relationship between our student and student address entry. What do we mean by 1-to-0 or 1-to-1 relationship? It means the student entity can be saved without the student address object, but the student address cannot be saved without the student entity. So in this case, we can say student, if you are storing the student with student address, you will set that 1-to-1. If you are storing the student without student address, then you can say it is 1-to-0 relationship. In this case, one end is required, and that is student. That is the principal entity. Principal entity is student, and that is the required one. Student address is the optional one. But you cannot store student address without student, but you can store student without student address, right? And this is what. Now, what I'm going to do, so to understand cascade delete operation, what we need to do, we need to modify the main method of the program class as follows, right? So main method of the program class. So you can see I'm having one student and I'm having one address object, and I'm setting that student as the I'm setting that address. So whatever the address I have created, that I have set that I have set on the address property of the student object, and then I'm adding the student. So in this case, what will happen? Now, whenever we call the step changes method, then not only the student, but the address is also going to be stored into the database. That means what? It means now, once you run this application, right, then you will see that address and students are going to be stored into the database, right? Let me comment these things and show you the things, right? Now run the application. Why it is taking time? Oh, so we have not written any statement, so that is already executed, right? So now refresh the database and go to the tables folder. And here you can see we are having student address, one student address. And here I'm also having the student. So we are having one student and the corresponding data is also stored here, right? Now what I'm going to do, so what I'm going to do means, right? So what I'm going to do means, okay, so let me comment this statement so that I can show you the data, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fetch the student data and remove the student data, right? So, right. So how to fetch the student information? Can anybody tell me what is the student ID? Context dot students. I want to fetch the student by ID. Which method I need to use? Find method. What is the ID of the student? One. So what is the student ID? Student address table is this one. So student ID is this one and student address is this one, right? So let me do one thing. Select tar from this. Student, right? So you can see both the data here. Now what I'm trying to do, I'm just removing that student information from the database, right? So what I'm trying to do, I'm just removing the student whose ID is 1. So when I'm removing the student whose ID is 1, then what will happen? That cascade delete will come into the picture automatically, because cascading is automatically managed by entity framework. And whenever you are having one-to-one relationship between two entities or between two database table, whenever you delete the primary key data, right, parent data, then automatically the child record is also going to be deleted from the database. That is what cascade delete in one-to-one relationship. So in this case, you can see I'm only removing the student entity. I'm not removing the student address. But even though I'm not removing the student address, whenever we remove the student entity and call the set changes method, then it will figure out what are the child entities of this record, right? Of this record, what are the child entity? There is one child record entity in the student address table. Let me delete that entity. So whenever you run this application code, then you will see that uh, along with the student entity, the student address is also going to be deleted from the database. And this is what the conflict occur. Table db student address, student statement. Student address, db student address. Why I'm getting this conflict? The statement db student address column student address ID. Foreign key. This should not be the case. Okay, let me do some changes. So let me do these things. Let me do these things. Remove student at line 1 to this. Let me close this one. Right. I don't know why I'm getting that error, but let me explain you this thing once more. So basically here I'm adding one student, one address into the database, and then I'm just removing the student entity. And whenever I remove the student entity and call the save changes method, then you will see that both the tables are going to be empty. Oh, sorry. So basically in this case, student and student address. Yeah. Okay, let me run the application. You can see this is empty, and you can also see this is empty. So both databases are empty because whenever you remove the student object, right, then now what I can say, the corresponding student address is also deleted from the database. Clear, guys?
Yes.
So next is one-to-many relationship. So one-to-many relationship, let us implement this one also. So one-to-many relationship between student and standard. So one student having one standard, but one standard can have many students. So let me implement that relationship here. This is my standard student table. And in this case, there is a collection navigation property in the other entity. What is the other entity in this case? Standard entity. So in the standard entity, I'm having the collection navigation property. That means one standard can have a collection of student, and one student can belong to a single standard. This is one to many relationship, right? So this is one to many relationship. Now what I need to do, I need to modify the context class. So here instead of student address, I'm including standard. Then the next change, I need to delete the database. So let me delete the database so that the database use exception error should be avoided. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to modify the database. So modify the main method. That's it. So what I'm doing here, I'm adding one standard. I'm adding two standard, standard one and standard student. I'm having two students, student one and student two, and I'm having standard one, right? You can see this is standard name and standard description. Let me take this above. Right, so you can also set this property here. Standard equals to standard one, and here standard equals to standard one. So you can also do this thing. So unnecessary statement should be avoided, right? So here you can see I'm having one standard and I'm having two students. And while creating the student, I'm attaching the standard entity as well, right? Now I have added student one, student two, and I have into the context object and then calling the save changes method. So once we call the save changes method, it will insert two students into the database along with the standard information, right? Now what will happen? Now whenever we remove the standard, this is my principal entity. Whenever I remove this standard, then what will happen? Now it will delete this record from the standard table. But then what will happen to the student entities which are referring to this standard? Then in that case, the foreign key value will become null. So in the case of a one-to-one, the child entities are deleted from the database. But when you are having one-to-many relationship, then in the child record, that foreign key column value will become null, right? So let me run the application and show you these things practically. Okay, this is done. Let me refresh the database. No, not yet done. Okay, now it's done. Refresh the database. Right, go to tables. Right, then you will see that standard table is going to be empty, no data, because we have deleted. But in the student table, you will see that the records are there, but that value which we have set with the standard becomes null. Clear, guys? Clear or not? So in one-to-one, data is going to be deleted from the child table, and in the case one-to-many, the foreign key value will become null. Clear or any question?
Yeah.
Right. So this is the null. Then what is happening in the case of a one-to-many relationship? Let us understand. So basically, if you know, in the case of a one-to-many relationship, we are having a joining table. That is the third table. So let me create the student and the courses entities. So this is my student entities. In the case of a many-to-many, both the entities having the collection properties. In one-to-one, both the entities having reference type properties. In one-to-many, one entity having the reference type property and other entity having the collection property. And in the case of many-to-many, both the entities having the collection properties, right? Student having the collection property of courses, and the course table will also having a collection property that represents students, right? So this is students, and let me open the course entity. And let me replace this. So in this case, you can see course having the collection property of type students, right? So basically, one course can belong taken by many students, and one student can take many courses, which will establish many to many relationship between the entities. So in this case, the student, and here we need to use course. The database table name is going to be courses, right? So in this case, one third table will be created to maintain the many-to-many relationship, and that table name is going to be student courses, right? Student course, and then it will append as student courses, and that will be contain the primary key of student table, the primary key of courses table, and then it will make both the column as the composite primary key, and that each column will pointing to the each column will also become a foreign key, and that will pointing to the respective primary key table, right? So what will happen? So in the case of one-to-many relationship, what will happen? Now, in the case of one-to-many relationship, if you delete any record, right? If you delete any record, then the corresponding entry will be removed from the joining table, right? So in this case, you can see I have created one courses collection, right? It is containing two courses. Then I'm creating one student entity, and I'm attaching that this student having these two courses. Then I'm calling the step changes method. When I call the step changes method, then this student entry will be there in the student table, and these courses entries will be there in the courses table, and in the student courses table, two entries are there, right? That is what the many-to-many relationship is managed. right? And in this case, as I have removed the student entity, then in that case, what will happen? In this case, the student entity is going to be deleted. The student entity is going to be deleted from the student table, but the courses information will not be deleted from the courses table. But as we have removed the student entity, then that student entity information, which is stored in the joining table, from that table, it is going to delete the data, right? For example, what I'm going to do, I'm adding another student. I'm adding student 1, I'm adding student 2, here adding student 1, here adding student 2, and removing the student 1. So here I'm providing the name as Anurag, and here I'm providing the name as Mohanty, right? And both are having the same. So in this case, once you run the application, if you do not remove this thing, then you will see 4 records in the database, right? Let me first show you that. Okay, let me comment these things, right? Let me delete the database. Oh, for this again, it is going to create. So we need to, right? So let me run the application. Okay, now verify the database. Now, if you verify the database, then you will see that course table is there, which is going to contain 2 records. Fine. Student table is there, which is going to contain 1 record. That is fine. Student course table is there, which is also going to contain 2 records. That is student ID 1 and the course ID 1 and 2. Now, once I delete this record, then automatically this 2 record is going to be deleted from the courses table. Even if I delete this course ID whose value is 1, right? If I delete this course ID whose value is 1, then from this table, this course ID 1 information is going to be deleted. This is how entity framework manage the relationships, right? So let me do this thing. So which one I want to show? I want to delete the student or I want to delete the course. You just tell me which entity I need to delete. Should I delete the student entity, which will delete both the record? If I delete one of the course ID, then one of the entity from this table is going to be deleted. Which example do I need to show you guys? Guys,
So we can go with the deleting the student and then it will remove the course.
sorry.
Removing the course, then it will delete the student record.
Okay, so let me remove the course entity, right? So what I'm going to do, right? So now go to the database, verify the tables. So why this is, oh my God, this is not the database. Right, so this is my course table. From this course table, we have deleted one whose ID is 1. So from the student table, the data will not be deleted, right? But from this table, one record should be deleted, right? Whose course ID is 1, right? Now, what I'm trying to show you is, now instead of this, what I'm doing, I'm just removing the student, right? So I'm just removing the student. Right, so once I remove the students, right, then you will see both records are going to be deleted from the joining table, right? Because both table contain the same student ID. Okay. Now students and the courses added, student remove. Student remove. Okay. Taking some time. Ready. Okay. Now, if you verify the database, right? Now, if you verify the database, then you will see student, the record is deleted. The courses, both records should be there. And from the student address, both record must be deleted. Here, guys, this is how the Cascade delete works automatically. Can I turn off the Cascade delete? Yes, you can turn off. How? For that, you need a Fluent API, and you can try this by your end. I'm just showing you once you do the model configuration. For that Cascade to turn off, you need to use model configuration. Student, right? Like this. Right. So if you want to remove, then you can use this option, right? You know how to implement one-to-many, right? One-to-many relationship, then you have to use will cascade on delete. And once you specify the false and their value is false and true, and based on the value, configure whether or not cascade delete is on for the relationship, right? If you pass true, then cascade delete is going to work, and if you pass false, then cascade delete is not going to work, right? So you can try this example by your end. Any question from you, from anyone? Guys, I have already given the example in our last session using cascade on delete option. You can just pass false and check whether that is working fine, right? So that's it for today. Thank you for your time. Anyone having any more questions?
No questions, sir. So, sir, next class on Saturday.
Saturday, it's going to be a long class, and I'm trying to
Yeah, it's a
complete
6:30 or 7 a.m.
7 a.m.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.